Welcome. I'm excited to talk with you today about extending the UI of Confluence with Forge. My name is Megan Hamilton, and I'm a senior product designer working on the Confluence team at Atlassian. This talk is meant for people who are new to Confluence development and new to Forge. The future that we want to bring to life is supercharging Confluence with the amazing and diverse apps that you are building on Forge. In this talk, I'll go over some tips on how to navigate extensibility for Confluence to help you plan your app's user experience. First of all, what is Confluence? Confluence Cloud is your remote-friendly team workspace where knowledge and collaboration meet. So you can keep this description in mind as you think about planning your app's use cases. Before we dive in, I'll start with some definitions. Modules are discrete building blocks that your app can use to integrate with Atlassian products. In this talk, I'll be focusing on modules that are specific to Confluence for Forge. Meanwhile, UIKit components are provided by the Forge platform. These include buttons, text, form fields, and more. There are 8 Forge Confluence modules today that each have a corresponding UIKit component. I'll be showing visuals of the UIKit components in this talk. Before I talk about the existing Forge Confluence modules, I'll share a mapping analogy to show how the Confluence user experience is organized. Starting at the top, you have the site or global level of Confluence. You can think about this as the world of a Confluence site. Then going deeper, you have spaces, which are represented here by a city in the world. Going deeper into spaces, you have individual pages, which can be represented by a house. And finally, within a page, you can think of that as a room in a house. So these are the main levels of the Confluence user experience. And now, keeping this mapping analogy in mind, I'll show the modules that live at each level of Confluence in Forge today, along with an example app use case that could use one of these UIKit components to work. We're starting at the site or global level, like I mentioned, and there are 3 Confluence Forge modules that live at the site level today. We have Global Page on the left, where apps can live in a drop-down menu. We have Homepage Feed, which displays content in a panel on the Confluence site homepage. And finally, on the right, we have Global Settings, which is useful for admin-facing experiences. So an example use case for an app living at this level of Confluence could be letting site admins display custom announcements for their entire organization. They could accomplish that, for example, in the homepage feed module. Next, at the space or city level of Confluence, we have 2 Forge modules, Space Page and Space Settings. An app that could live in Space Page, for example, could let users read and contribute to a space-related FAQ page. Going deeper at the page or house level of Confluence, we have 2 modules. We have Content Action, which lets you add an action item in the drop-down menu for a specific page. And then on the right, we have Content Byline Item, which shows content at the top of a page. An example use case for an app living in a page could be letting users count how many macros are in a page. You could accomplish this by adding an action item with Content Action. And finally, at the deepest level of the Confluence user experience, we have 1 Forge module today, which is called the Context Menu. I'm actually going to highlight this example use case a bit more coming up next. So you've seen the analogy, you've seen the levels of the Confluence user experience in our modules. How can you apply this? Let's walk through that example. So in this situation, first you'll want to think about, what do you want your app to let users accomplish when they're using your app? For example, right now, we're starting with an app purpose of letting Confluence users see definitions for specific words in a page, so acting as a dictionary or a glossary. When we examine this use case and break it down, we can see that the core action, letting users see definitions for pages, relies on content that lives inside a page at that deepest level of the Confluence experience. So we'll want to choose at least one module for the user that lives at that level of Confluence. And when we go to the level of inside a page, it makes sense to use the context menu module and UIKit component, not only because it's the only module we have that lives inside a page today, but it's a great fit for the interaction you want a user to experience. You can use this module to let users highlight the word that they're interested in seeing, and then place your definition content in this drop-down toolbar menu that appears with the UIKit component. So to wrap up, we have these 8 Forge modules for Confluence right now, and we're also working on building more modules and extensibility so that you will have even more ways to weave your app into Confluence and create amazing experiences for our customers. Keep this map in mind as you plan out your first or your next Confluence Forge app and choose which modules are the best fit for your app's use case. We'll be sharing a post on the CDAC website, communitydeveloper.Atlassian.com, after this talk. It's accessible via this Go link. And I'd love to hear from you on how helpful this information is, as well as any feedback or questions that you have. Thank you so much for listening.